I remember her saying very clearly, when you go for a high note, you don't reach this way. You reach that way. Let me think. Also, she said something about when you take a low breath, she said it's like taking a fence post and making a stake in the ground. And that bottom of that stake just goes down in the ground and stays there. And that also resonated with me. And these are things that I remember it clicked. I got what she was saying. I remember when my first lessons with her were after lessons, I won't mention any names, but after lessons with someone early on that I got in trouble with. And I remember going in to my first lessons with her thinking, I thought I knew how to sing, first of all. And what I know about singing compared to what she's sharing with me is like an anthill, and I'm looking at an Alp. I just knew I had so much to learn. But she was, at the very beginning, I was coming out of some issues, and she was so patient and so kind and would repeat until it clicked. I've always felt that her harshness sometimes and roughness prepared us all for the career, because if we could survive her, we could deal with whatever was next. And I appreciated it at the end of it. I remember.
No, there was that aspect.
I remember coming out of one lesson one day and thinking, if she hates me so much and she thinks I'm so terrible, why is she even teaching me? Oh, she thinks I can do it. You know? Oh, okay. Well, then let's keep going. That was a revelation.
Yeah.
But I remember her saying she would have this little pantomime. And when I got something, she wanted to lock it in, make sure I got it. And she would see a look on my face where it looked like that was right. And she'd say, when it's right, it seems like you're shouting in chest voice. So she'd go through this little pantomime of making sure no one could overhear it. And through that, she was saying, don't say this to anybody. And I'm not telling you to do this. But it might seem, when you get it right, like you're shouting in chest voice. And I'd go, oh, yeah. Can you read my mind? But, there's rarely a lesson that goes by that I don't mention something. Some word she used, some phrase, some concept.
Yep.
I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without her, that's for sure. But I remember I asked her once, it just seemed like, I think I said to her one day, Miss Harshaw, I think you could teach a shoebox how to sing, really. And I said, what do you do if you work with a voice and you get down to the basics and realize the voice isn't good? It's really not good. After you've done your work with it and you've fixed all the problems, the voice itself really isn't that good. And she said, well, it's like you've got a carpet and you take the tacks out and you roll the carpet back and you realize that the wood is rotten. So you take the carpet and you roll it back out and you take the tacks and you put them back down and put it back where it was.
Here is another aspect of Harshaw. She was passionate and intense. And I mean both of those in a good way. I remember one time, here is this 6'6" galoot from Podunkville coming in to do his lesson, and there's two singers from the Met sitting on the bench. She had that bench in front of her studio, and you knew if you had a lesson at 2:00, you knew to show up at 2 and not have anything until about 5 or 5:30, because you were going to be sitting on the bench and she was going to be behind. Because once you went into her studio and she closed that door, that was her world. That was her focus. You were the most important person and thing to her. Didn't matter that there were two people at the Met, from the Met, waiting to take a lesson with her. It was now your time. The door was closed. You're her focus. And I always remembered that. Well, just to give you a little bit of background, I have had a somewhat circuitous career path. Went to undergrad, then went to Indiana, studied with Harshaw, went to Philadelphia. One of the smartest things I did was not move to New York, but I moved to Philadelphia. Much cheaper, and the rent that I was paying there paid for a lot of auditions, the train fare for auditions to New York. But went to Europe. I sang in the United States regionally and so forth in a lot of places, Columbus, Fort Worth, Philadelphia, New York, so forth, but really started the meat of my career in Europe, the opera houses in Europe. I met my wife, who is also a professional opera singer, in Philadelphia. The two of us decided never to part ways, because he who travels lightest travels farthest, but you make plans and God laughs. But we got engaged and spent the first couple of years of our married life in Europe, living 7 hours from each other. So we decided family over fame. So we came back and started academic careers. And I had a fairly decent career as a teacher. It wasn't that long, but I've had students who've been on Broadway, students been at the Met. I have several students who are heading up prestigious programs like Ohio University and Peabody Conservatory. So I feel good about the impact that I've had on the students that I did teach. But at some point, my skill set kind of led me to academia, to academic administration, and for the past 25 years, I've been an academic dean, and utilizing some of the skill sets of listening very carefully and staying relaxed and not getting tense. She said, technique is everything. And she said, 75 or 80% of the time, you're going to go sing, and you just are about to get a cold, or you're just getting over a cold, or you just had your period, or you're getting over your period, or you just had an argument with your husband and you're upset, or you just had an argument with your children, or that life about 80% of the time would inculcate itself in some way that you weren't feeling quote unquote 100% and in the groove. She said that's when you have to fall back on technique. If you don't think about and utilize the technique, then you don't know what you're doing wrong when you're doing it wrong. Here's the gift she gave me. I went to Indiana to try to find out just how good I was. I never thought that I was good enough to be a professional opera singer. Certainly not on the international level, until I walked into her studio and she told me I could be and should be.
That is a gift.
That is a great gift.
And that's something that I have learned in my own teaching, is that where I feel a pojo might be different to where you feel it. So depending on the makeup of your rib cage, the sense of lean may be a little bit higher than in my body. So it's I find that important to make sure that the physiology of the person in front of me matches where they need to feel it, and it may not be where I feel it.
I don't remember ever hearing her use the term, but I know she evolved as a teacher, and the word, I think, became more commonplace, perhaps in the 80s and 90s.
She said that in Princeton.
Did she?
I remember her saying, lean.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
But
I think
the sense of leaning, I find sometimes people have that feeling that they're supposed to lean forward.
No.
And that,
Yeah.
I mean, to my mind, totally wrong.
Right.
And so it's so interesting to hear you talk about it, because that's, what we were taught. I just never heard her call it a poncho, which...
Well, maybe she didn't. Maybe
she did.
Maybe that's my terminology, but
But she certainly taught that.
absolutely. And I know that the back breathing came from Shrunrene. So there was, there's the Garcia idea of appoggio, of, how the pressure needs to remain below the glottis.
Yeah.
But I know bringing in the back is more German.
Yeah.
And that she really did stress with me.
Yeah.
Really using your back. And I go all the way up to the trapezius muscles, making sure that your shoulder blades are also involved. And that's, that also helps release the jaw, it helps release the neck and open the throat. Something that I've learned recently that I think it's interesting. And I usually take my iPhone and with the flashlight and I'll look inside my students' throats. I have at least 4 singers right now. Great big heads, big barrel chests, big necks, big voices, tiny pharynx. When you look inside and you see where the arches are and the uvula, it's like a walnut. And asking them to lift closes the throat. I ask them to stretch this way, kind of like a rectangle. Mm-hmm. All of them had intonation issues. This completely solves the intonation. And I don't know how I figured that out, but it's, that's what I mean about one size doesn't fit all. Mm-hmm. And so there's this sense, if trying to round for them, they can't do it. So, it's made me wonder, I got to sing with Birgit Nielsen and standing behind her holding my spear going, I'm trying to look at videos to try to see inside her throat because I suspect it was similar because of the way she prepared. It was all very wide.
Yeah.
Everything was this way, wide and very direct. Mm-hmm. So I just find that interesting, and knowing how somebody's makeup is, how their body is, they need to feel the sense of lean and sense of support differently.
Yeah. We all feel things, I think, differently.
Yeah, that's what makes this, I find it, that's what keeps me interested in this, in teaching voice, is that, I constantly go back and read Lamperti, I go back and read Garcia, but I also read other things.
Were there moments after, of course I know you were constantly every year with her, but were there years where you discovered something that she had said 10 years ago and you said, that's what she means by that?
Oh yeah. And that's, she used to say there's nothing like on-the-job training. Yeah. That the more you're on the stage and not in the studio, you're going to find. And also I was fortunate as the first Adler Fellow in San Francisco. And it was their philosophy to put us next to, great singers. And so standing next to Nielsen and Leonie Riesnick and James King, and going, oh, that's what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. It's lyric. When you sing big stuff, it's lyric. Yeah. And keep your voice up above the Mason-Dixon line, as she would say to me. So I think on-the-job training, yes, absolutely, the light bulbs go off. I tell you, I think the thing that she taught me, and this is something that Polenzani will tell you, he says that we teach very differently, but that she taught me to listen to good singing and to know what to listen for. Mm-hmm. And I believe that, and I think that happened with all the watching the master classes and the lessons after my graduate studies, studio class at Indiana, watching her work with my colleagues. Mm-hmm. And, all very different, but we're working for the same sensations. I think that's something I'm proud of in my own teaching, and I think that was the same with her and all of us in the studio. We all had unique sounds, but we were going for the same thing.
Yeah.
We didn't sound the same, mm-hmm. which we shouldn't. And so, but the information, the foundational information that she gave me was the seed for everything else I've learned in my now 40 years of teaching.
I studied with her for in place for 3 years in Bloomington, and then I went out into the world and continued to study with her until she died. And sometimes we would have lessons on the telephone. And there was a Verdi aria that gave me just fits while I was with her, and it was one of the national anthems of Bassones, Il Lacerato Spirito. And it was, of course, the recitative that drove me, to despair. And I just couldn't find it. I couldn't find the position and the larynx position and everything. Well, a few years after that, I was teaching, and I would, I practiced all during the day. And one afternoon, I was practicing, and I said, let me haul out my worst enemy here. And it just blossomed. It just absolutely, I knew it was right. I knew it was right. I raced home, called her, and I remember putting the phone on the counter in my kitchen, my little professor's kitchen, and I sang the recitative, and I said, what do you think about that? And she said, this is what I think. Sometimes I plant seeds that blossom early, and sometimes I plant seeds that blossom a little bit later.
That's a great story.
And I think that every teacher worth his or her salt should subscribe to that a bit, that you're not going to fix everything at that moment. You may plant some seeds that may take a while to blossom. We are very fortunate in our brief lives on this planet to meet extraordinary people. And I'm talking not just special, good, nice people. I'm talking about people who are extraordinary, who walk among giants, who have walked among giants. And I have a handful in my life, and Margaret Harshaw is one of them. And I'm grateful. The kids say I'm blessed, but I am truly blessed. And I would not have had the career that I had and sung in the places that I got to go to and have all these friends like Verdi and Mozart and Berlioz and all those people, had it not been for Margaret Harshaw. So I am grateful and more than grateful.
So is there anything about singing or technique that she told you that we haven't covered that you think is important to understand?
That we haven't talked about? Well, the thing I did agree with Ms. Harshaw on, singing should not be complex. The low support, high placement, no, open throat, no tension. It's pretty simplistic. Mm-hmm. And I think that the challenge for Ms. Harshaw and for all of us that have taught is to unteach the things that are contrary to that. Yeah. And so that's, I think that was always her challenge also, because she taught great voices, Yeah. And so people that needed her help were doing things more than they should do, or I know I was, or doing things that were totally incorrect. Mm-hmm. And you had to go back to she would always talk about a baby when they were born, how they made perfect sound and when they cried, and that we had to go full circle back
to that.
back to that. Yeah.
I always think about other arts, and it always seems to me that great artists, as they age, find simplicity in their art form. And that's a difficult thing. When you're young, you want to complicate things. But as you get older, it's like this tearing away of the things that aren't essential.
It's a great life lesson.
Yeah.
Just not a singing lesson.
That's true.
And that's what I find about Miss Harshaw used to say that to me all the time. Rebecca, you are your voice. Did she say this to you? Your voice is you. Everything about you is about your voice. Everything about your voice is about you. And that is so true in life. It's like, they say everything you need to know in life you learned when you were in kindergarten. I think everything you need to know in life you learned in a voice lesson.
There's some truth to that. Yeah, for sure.
Like I say, there's so many things about the things that she told me that I saw later on. Oh, that's what she meant. When I would read about, because I was a big researcher. Daniel's not the only one in New York, doing, Bel Canto. I love to read the old treatises. I read the old Garcia, I read the Manin, and Vennard. Yeah. And she mentioned Vennard once to me. She said, I hear that it's got a lot of information in it, but as she said, you can't learn to sing from a goddamn book. And which I think she's right. That's old school. Yeah. These are what you use. Yeah. And the book is just a reminder of some things that you can think about. But so I think that, and I saw that when I would read Vennard or I'd read that was exactly what they were talking about. It was exactly the same kind of thing. So it like I say, you probably had the same aha moments. Many. It's funny, like I say, I think there's so much of it that we kind of had to put together later. And I think she knew that. I think she was, because I asked her once, and I remember, God, I was so young and so stupid, but I asked her once, I just said, do you ever worry that this technique, this truth, is going to die out? And she said, oh no. She said, it's going to always be here. He said, because it works. And I was like, okay, well, that, she answered that. But that was, it was, and she was right. I think, if you do some of these basic things, and I later, having to teach musical theater, I had to try and see if I could adapt some of this to musical theater. It doesn't always work, and some of the things are directly in conflict. But it's the kind of thing that so I think after I left her, I had a much greater appreciation for what she told me. Time that I was singing and I was having trouble I was working on Una furtiva lagrima, and I was trying to do the cadenza at the end, and the alternate, you pop up to the A. And A was a problem note for me, always. And she told me, she said, in your voice, A is in a break. And before you get into the real high voice. She said, in different tenors, it can be A flat or A, or sometimes even B flat. And B flats were no problem for me, but A was just she said, whenever you sing A, put it in the same place as a C. And it worked. But then I was having trouble getting that A to come out. And I was like, I was so frustrated and so angry, and she could see it. And so she said, let's just stop a minute. And so we were just sitting there, and I'm like, I was just, fuming. And she said, there was in the bush outside her studio, there was a bird, and it was singing. And she said, do you hear that? She said, that bird sings because it has to. And she said, there's no reason why, and so do you. And there's no reason why you can't sing just as good as that bird. and that just sort of, that's one of those moments that I just remembered that and I still remember that because it just showed her, she knew what it was like to, to just be up against a brick wall, but then stop and just, and regroup. And then I sang it again, and, and then eventually it popped out. I just had to think it higher than I was doing. But I'll always treasure, those moments like that like I say, I mean, she was never ugly to me one time the whole time I studied with her.
I talked to her endlessly, really, about, I think she picked up on my interest in maybe teaching, but certainly helping other singers. I was always interested in what my colleagues were doing, the ones I was on stage with. It actually got to a point I was sort of more interested in helping them than figuring out what I needed to do next. And that should have been a big red flag of my life now, but at the time, not so much. But she and I talked a lot about what we heard in other singers. And I look back on that now and think, oh my God, that was a huge gift for me and changed the course of my life in many ways. So that, and I think the other thing that I think might be most important that she shared with me, that I feel she gave to me, while I grew up having a very good sense of work ethic, because my parents had excellent work ethics, and the idea that you strive and you have goals, all of that was in place. Margaret Harshaw put a new definition on setting the bar, how high you set the bar to meet what you want, what your goals are. And, she wouldn't even say what my goals are. What is required of you in this art form? What does it mean to be a singer? It's really not about you, dear. Do you want to serve the music? Do you want to be a servant in this industry in that way? And because I was so into the whole thing, how it came together, not just what I was singing or even what my colleagues are singing, who had my line in the orchestra. And all of that was fascinating to me, not to mention the tiny props that were being made that were going to complete my whole role eventually. Costumes, I didn't care very much about. And I think that's just tied up into self-image, and I don't like to go shopping either. So what you wear, not so much. But what you're holding and what you're using to complete what that character has to say, I was much more fascinated about. So we had lots of those kind of conversations. I didn't know I would need them all for what I do now, but I use them all every day. Every day. And that setting the bar high, I remember as I was sort of transitioning and not going to try to sing professionally anymore, there was days of, oh man, if I just screw this up, or she's going to be disappointed in me for this, or gosh, I've spent all this money on this so far. And I could see how it was a transition, and yet there was some guilt going on and all of that. And I came back to that, but I've set the bar high for myself. And it is now facing this direction instead of this direction. And it wasn't a giving something up for something else. I drug it all in to what I was going to do next. I just think she made that possible for me. You could hear outside the office, because we were always sitting on the bench, waiting for lessons, because they never started on time. And you could hear what was going on in there. And then I would go in, next thing, and she was a different person than the one I just heard outside. And I do think that she kind of washed her ears out with every new person that came in. She also had an incredible memory for exactly what we were doing the last time you were in that room. Better than mine. Mm-hmm. I started making notes after my lessons. I never felt comfortable writing during the lesson for some reason. She wouldn't have cared, but I didn't do it. But I started the minute I left writing down everything that we'd done. And I did record towards the end of it more. When I got there in the 70s, we weren't really doing that. But yeah, then I got so I was my little cassette and whatever at the time.
Yeah. 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 She had, that was really a superpower she had.
Yeah, I use that every day. She just thinking about her reminds me, okay, I just had a really hard session with somebody. I have to let that go because the next person's worked in a completely different way this week. It's brought in completely other repertoire, has completely other issues going on in their life. And there are times that's exhausting to me. And then I remember, geez, she did 8 of these a day sometimes. But she knew I loved music, so that was never really part of our conversation of, do you really love this? Do you really? Because there were times when we would work on something and I would just kind of, the tears would run down my face. And the first time it happened, I remember she said, now what's that about? And I thought, I don't know. But it was a new piece of music and it was just something that just spoke to me. So it was like, okay, as long as you're not doing something feeling sorry for yourself there, because that's not what we're doing. And I said, no, it's about the music, and I just need a minute. And I'm telling my mother this story one time, and she goes, oh, okay, that all makes sense to me. And I said, how so? And she said, well, when you were little, you liked to watch Lassie on TV. But the music that came up at the end was this mournful, sad music. And we turned it off right before the music at the end, because no matter how great the story was and how much you loved it, you sobbed then for the next 15 minutes, having heard the postlude of that TV show. And I think, okay, fair enough. Some things you do come into this world with. And I was just lucky enough to meet Margaret Harshaw as I was putting a lot of that together. I guess the only thing is, and something that I wind up saying seemingly a great deal to the young singers I work with now, you really do have to put it into your body. Just because you can learn the notes and the rhythms and good phrasing and maybe your diction is fantastic and you throw that together in 2 weeks, it doesn't mean you know how to sing it. It takes time. It just takes time. And I'm sorry that as an industry we've become so add water and stir, because it takes time. And for a while I think we all blamed that on quick transportation. Now you could just fly everywhere and you didn't have to take a boat across the ocean. And it's choices we've made. We're so anxious for the next fabulous whatever. And you hear it in someone young, and then you push them too fast. I also think she's right when she said, what you sing like today doesn't show up tomorrow or even next Friday. But in 6 months to a year, what you're doing right now will show up. I've never believed that more than I do right now because of COVID. There's good 18 months that a lot of people did not sing anything. And it shows now. And I can tell the ones who went home to a bedroom in their parents' house, because everybody was like coming together again and doing their exercises and doing their things. They were able to stay at least pliable. They missed out on, special coachings and this and that and whatever, but they stayed pliable. And then there are those who aren't. And unfortunately, the timing of it for people in their later 20s is really rough.
Yeah.
Because that is that settling thing when what you're doing now is what you're going to be doing. And not that you won't keep tweaking certain things, but a lot of it is formed by then in the early 30s. And if they miss that 18 months, 2 years, they got to want to really get it back.
Yeah.
And I have several who do. They recognize it in some way of, lost time, okay, got to get my rollerblades on and take off now. And that's the only way. It's the only way to get it. And to be patient with yourself. She also, without using today's jargon, helped me understand that I need a little team of people I could count on to help me make choices with repertoire, to listen with ears that say, actually, no, that's not as good as you were doing it 6 months ago. So what would Miss Harshaw say, or what would, this certain coach I was working with, or whatever. They didn't have to know how to fix it, but they had to be honest with me that, it doesn't sound as good. So then, okay, let me fix it. If it doesn't sound as good, then for that person, it's not as warm, or it's not as rich, or it's not as pingy, or it's not, I could figure that part out. But then fixing it yourself was always hard, and yet invaluable. Once I learned how to do that a little bit. Invaluable.
She said, simplicity is the height of elegance. Well, yeah. It's not like an over-decorated yard in New Jersey with too many fountains and Tony Bennett, rest his soul, singing on one of them. It's simplicity is the height of elegance. Yeah. And one of my little pet peeves then and now is use of the word perfect. And she said, beautiful, not perfect. It's the imperfections that give each artist their individuality. Oh, yeah. And I have choral friends, and I suppose singers also, who will just keep drilling their choir to find the perfection they're after. Well, I mean, it's semantics in a way, but perfection kind of designates a place of having achieved, and there's nothing left. She did describe to me once about sort of your own personal scale of judging yourself. Scale of 10. Well, you'd like to be on average. You wouldn't want to dip below 7, right? You may hit 8 or 9. If you ever hit what you judge to be 10, that becomes 9. And you reset the scale. Those kinds of just artistic and personal kind of work ethic things, and artistic viewpoints. I know one of the main things that has helped me in my singing a lot and teaching, and that I remember from her, has to do with tongue. I mentioned it earlier. We don't, of course, want the tongue retracted or depressed. But she was I would ask her specific questions. Like I found some notes earlier last night. Does the tongue need to be low and wide in the middle voice and the bottom, or is it just the top? Well, the answer is yes, it does. And she would give me a very quick, to the point answer to a direct question. I did have when we gave an honorary doctorate to Miss Harshaw. This would have been the early 90s. I don't think you were there. You were probably in Germany at the time. I think you were. We had a dinner at one of the super nice places in Princeton. It no longer exists. La Hierre. Now it's Agricola. It's still a great restaurant, just different. But they had this luncheon in honor of her after commencement. And we invited, and I was in charge of inviting some people. And invited a colleague, a former, not a teaching colleague, but a singer who has worked with her, that I know very casually, and we were not in school together. But I said, I called this gentleman to invite him to be a part of it. His representative, I'll say, because I don't want to give away personal identities, but the person to whom I was speaking was his representative, and he found it necessary to say, you should know that singer not to be named no longer uses Margaret's approach, as though this body of technique and value and motivation, etc., had been put aside, and something else was in its place now. It was like that. At least that's the impression I got. And okay, I mean, why do you have to tell me that? Number one, is it true? Because you're not the singer himself saying it. But I found that really odd.
It is odd, yeah.
I mean, some, you may, we're always able to, and we should, refine and change our interpretation of things. In a way, it's almost like the gospel according to Margaret. You get different denominations, different viewpoints, but it's based on consistent, accepted ideas and words. So, but I thought that was kind of strange.
Well, I've heard it said, she never said this to me, but I know she made the comment to some people that she said, my name may get you more, how was it framed? I can't remember how. May get you more in trouble than it'll help you,
Yeah, so like, yeah.
I don't know. She was a complex person, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. There was one other event that I meant to say. It went through my mind. She would come to Westminster in the summers and did that for, I don't know, probably 10 or more years, quite a few. And I was here for 3 or 4 of those before. Our first experience at Westminster was summer of 1980. I was a singer in a workshop called The Complete Singer. And she did the voice classes, and Marty Katz did coaching classes, and Paul Sperry did some lectures on American song, and it was a fabulous week. I think there were 9 of us, and it was a wonderful thing. And there's a lot about that week that was life changing, including the work with her. And that was sort of my audition of her. So that was the first summer I engaged with her at all. It was at Westminster, and then other summers. Well, on Friday mornings at Westminster, she would hear, maybe the noon hour, there would be a master class. Anybody, pretty much, could just walk up and sing for her. It's an open master class. And you'd get your 5 cents worth, and you'd sit down, and the next person, just like that. And I can name that song in 2 notes, She can name it in 1 note or none. Take a look, you know what you're going to hear. But this soprano came up, sang Monica's Waltz. And as I remember a little bit about the sound, it was kind of tonguey, kind of throaty, not super clear. Some obvious technical problems, and she was charming, and it was well acted, etc. But so she was done. We applauded, and Miss Harshaw said the first thing and to me she's always Miss Harshaw. I've never called her Margaret. It's my southern. I'm too nice. That's the problem. But
it's reverence.
Well, yeah, it's reverence. But I remember. She just sat there. It's like, she would sit. Have you ever thought about vocal silence? And the girl just burst into tears, ran out of the room, ran up the aisle, slammed the doors, and we're all dumbfounded. It's like, what just happened here? And after we all sort of collectively pulled ourselves together and the girl was long gone, she said, "Isn't that a shame?" She said, this lady's teacher from California called me, asked me if I would hear her because there were some problems and just wanted to get my diagnosis. She didn't use the word diagnosis, maybe she did. And then this is what happens. This was the only time we could do it. The times were booked. This was it. And, and she said, what I would have said is, you could just go on silence for 2 days. Don't sing, don't talk, don't listen to music, don't think about music. don't do nothing. She didn't say that exactly either. But that's what she would have said, and the benefits of it would give you a chance to sort of reboot and let things start to heal and realign, etc. But it was too charged of a possibility for this. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was really dramatic because we didn't expect this.
She was so exacting with how she wanted the technique. And what I have found in my own sort of research, a couple of years ago, I finally found Garcia's first treatise, a translation of Garcia's first treatise, which I had never read. That Hints on Singing is his second one, and I'd never read the first one. And so I start reading the first one, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's absolutely amazing how much of what we were taught was exactly Garcia. There was not this big shift away from it. And I now sort of understand, this is really in the latest Nats journal, there is an article about Anna Schoenrene. It's not a very long article. It's a really good article, and this is something that I never happened. I read Anna Schoenrene's biography, which is called America's Musical Heritage, I think, or Inheritance. And the author of this article says that she was so exacting, and it was out of loyalty to Garcia and Pauline Viardot, who was her teacher. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh, yeah, that's why Miss Harshaw was the way that she was, because it was out of loyalty to Schoenrene, out of loyalty to the Garcia technique. And so, when things get, as we know, when we played telephone as little kids, where you pass secrets down, and how much it would change getting through generations. It has not changed that much. The basic tenets are the same tenets that Garcia was teaching, and we all add our own vocabulary to it and our own unique experiences, but it's all there in that book. And I just found that fascinating, and I think that's why all of us who had the privilege and pleasure of studying with her feel such a duty to do this in, I'm going to say, the right way, because we knew that we were taught that way, and that she knew she was taught that way. And I just never thought about it as loyalty in that regard, that the toughness came out of, this is information that I have to pass down correctly. And I just thought that was fascinating. But it is something that was figured out over 100 years ago has really kept pretty intact. And I think that's just amazing. And I hope that the students that I'm teaching understand that. I hope I've teach them in a way that respects that heritage and that they take that on. So.
Yeah.
There were things that she wanted me to do that I didn't learn to do until after she died, which was kind of late because I was well into my 40s by then. And had I really understood just how far back you can go, I mean, I thought I was going pretty far back in that direction. But when I figured out how to give myself even more space, particularly to go into my upper register, that made a vast difference. And I remember the day that happened. I had come home from a job, getting ready for the next job, and I was practicing high notes, and I was whacking away at them, and they were okay. And then I hit one that was really so-so, and I thought, oh, Emily, you can do better than that. So I just kind of, put the invisible hot potato in the back of my mouth, or grapefruit, or bubble, or whatever your preferred image was, to get everything out of the way back there. And I took a flying leap, and it was just great. Barry came out of his room. He said, what did you just do? That was really good, you know? And I remember being regretful that I hadn't been able to take what she'd said to that degree earlier, but better late than never, you know?
Yeah.
So it was amazing. The change was so fast. And as I'm sure you all know, once you learn what it feels like not to have your neck involved, not to have your larynx wackling around or getting tugged up, your body won't do it it doesn't want to do it any other way. And so suddenly you have a technique that you can trust. And I really, really, really appreciated the fact that she explained everything in very minute detail, what I was going to feel, where I was going to feel it, what the exercises were that I was doing, and why I was doing them. Because, you know, I came out of conservatory singing 9-note scales and this, that, and the other thing, but really without any sense of what their purpose was, what their job was developmentally. And so I felt like I'd found a technical home for myself. And I didn't see Miss Harshaw very often because I was already working regularly when I went to her. I do remember thinking to myself sometimes that I mean, it's a moot point. I'll never know. I don't know if I would have dealt with her as well at 17 as I did at 28 or 29, actually, because she could be tough. I did not experience that part of her personality but once. And that was at least only on the telephone. It's not as if she laced into me in person. But I know that, you know, she had a reputation of being really tough on people sometimes. And that was never my experience. She always used to say, get your tongue down, because if it's up, it's tugging on your larynx. Basically, that the base of my tongue was going to have an impact on how steady my larynx could remain. And I don't know that I ever had my tongue completely flat. I think I didn't. And frequently, even now, when I look at singers and they open their mouth and their tongue is just parked down there, I think, wow, look at that. That's great, you know. But she did tell me to park my tongue tip on my lower gum ridge. And these were all early on in my lessons, the first few. I had a lot to chew on, and I liked that, because imagery is so important in vocal teaching. But if you tell somebody to imagine something but don't tell them what they need to do to embody that image, you're not helping them very much. You know, people used to talk about a pear-shaped tone. What's a pear-shaped tone? Did you ever hear that term?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, what? Yeah. She used to draw pictures on my music of little faces, you know, a profile, and the various direction. You also have time not just to focus on that, but to focus on sending your sound out. She used to say across the street to the pastry shop across from the old Met, she would sing to the eclairs in the window. Did she say that to you? No. Yeah, well, she said it to me. And, you know, and that was another thing. I had no idea just how intertwined your mental focus was with your vocal focus, and that you weren't going to succeed one without the other. And that when you get tired, it's usually your brain that's given up the ghost sooner than your voice has, you know. Yeah, she helped me so much. And I was so grateful to have met somebody who told me what to do and how to do it. And the students that I've had have also appreciated that. They're always saying, nobody ever told me how to do it. you know? And okay, everybody's body is a little different. You have to learn your own body. And as you go through life, maybe you make some adjustments to that. But to actually understand what every exercise is for. This is not for making a beautiful sound. This is for tapping into your resonance in the most significant, aggressive way that you can so that you know what it feels like. This exercise is for bringing resonance down the octave. We replace the slur with a scale eventually. I don't know whether you did that one or not, but she used to always say, you know, I want you to resonate between the notes that aren't there. Oh, the other thing that had so much impact on me, I remember her saying that legato was not a musical choice you imposed on something. Legato was the natural result of unrelenting resonance. And that if you resonated through every note, every quarter tone you couldn't sing, from the front of a phrase to the back, it would automatically be impeccably legato, and it was. And I do remember, she didn't say this to me, but I remember figuring out, not terribly long after we started working together, that at least for me, the passaggio had to be the bottom of my upper register, not the top of my middle register. When I went to her, I sang chronically flat in my upper passaggio. It was always flat, which is why I was the worst Mozart singer on God's green earth. I was truly awful because all of his roles are kind of in the same range. They may not have the high notes in them, but they all sit on the high side. And anything, you know, Dorabella, any of that stuff that sat sort of at the top of the staff, I would die in it because I didn't know how to open my throat. And if you can't open the back of your throat, you're not going to get through your passaggio in one piece. And so for me, it always helped to think that that the passaggio was actually required more effort than anything that came above it or below it. That if I got over that, I'd be fine. But that if I didn't prepare myself soon enough for it, then I was going to have a problem. And she always used to say, get there before you get there. You know, and that was the best application of that admonishment, really. Yeah. If you're not there before you get there, you're basically going to get caught with your pants down. Mm-hmm. And it was a game changer for me.
Did she ever say to you, Mozart, you have to place it a third higher?
Yes. And she told me that she kept singing Donna Anna and some Mozart roles even when she'd gone, or maybe she just kept practicing them. But she always said Mozart required the highest placement of all. And it made perfect sense to me because Mozart was the thing that I sang the worst. You know, Rossini wasn't a problem. Things that went high and low weren't a problem. Things that sort of just dangled around there. Yeah. Were so difficult for me at the time when I went to see her. And that's why I went to see her. Because my manager said, you know, you're always flat in your upper passaggio. And I'm going, huh? You know. And that's why. It's not complicated. It's very simple. But I do remember realizing, I don't think that she said this to me, but maybe she did, that singing is really glorified howling. Mm-hmm. That it's just, this big open space where you're wailing, not yelling, not screaming, just exuding this open noise. And I always would think to myself, all right, I care about the noise. Mm-hmm. It's not that I don't care about interpretation. It's not that I want people to sing and be boring. But if you don't have the noise, the rest of it doesn't matter. And if you have the noise, all you have to do is do what the composer wrote on the stage, and 95% of your interpretive job is done for you. That it really is about the sound. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people say, well, the text is that. Yeah, of course you want to make the text mean something. But if it's not being expressed through the sound that gives people goosebumps, and that's not quantifiable. It's just a visceral response that you hear something and it gives you the chills, then you didn't fulfill what the composer wanted, you know. I found myself in Paris once at the Museum of Romanticism. And I mean, where else but Paris would you find a museum of romanticism? And there was a big portrait of Pauline Viardot in there. And I stood in front of it and I cried. Because Miss Harshaw had always said that Madame Schoenrené had been a student of Pauline Viardot, and that what she was teaching was, you know, she was bringing down that vocal heritage. And I mean, you can see what it's doing to me now. And I remember turning and seeing this portrait, and it took my breath away. And, you know, I mean, it's not that I felt Miss Harshaw there with me. It wasn't quite as woo-woo as that. But I don't know. It was just the most wonderful reminder of what I had been taught and what I wanted to share with people going forward. That, you know, it's like new math. How helpful was new math? It was not helpful. And I mean, I have nothing against vocal pedagogy at all. I don't know any, frankly. I mean, I didn't take any of that kind of stuff, and I probably would be a better teacher if I had some more of that technical information. But she was simply so clear in what she asked for that I never felt that I was missing something. I never left a lesson scratching my head saying, I didn't really get that. I couldn't necessarily do it, but I understood it. You know. The other thing that was so helpful, she said at first, practice 10 minutes at a time, 3 times a day. But what she did say to me, she said, well, look, if you were going to go run a marathon, would you just go out and run 26 miles? She said, you wouldn't. You would start in small increments and work your way up. And she always said, don't practice to fatigue. Stop before you're tired.
And of course, she also talked to me about how she talked to me about how the tenor voice is the only voice that sings in an area where the speaking voice has nothing to do with it practically. It's in a way a controlled yell, and like it has to be done correctly, or you'll just kill yourself and you'll destroy your voice. And you know, so I mean, which that was. I wouldn't say it was especially news, but it was a new way of thinking, you know, especially for a guy whose top has largely remained intact from the beginning until now. And you know, like I never thought of it that way. But as my voice grew, I started to understand what she was talking about. And that noise that we make above E or F, that whatever the last open chest sound you can make is above that spot is something that has to be put together just right, or it won't last. And that was I'd never thought of. Well, of course, I always had high C. Can I sing high C? Of course I can sing high C. Well, it's not like that. I mean, I still have my high C, but I mean, like, I understand what she's going for. Also, I mentioned earlier about how opinionated she was about singers. I mean, you know, I'd come home and say, oh boy, I just heard this great tenor, you know, it was whoever, you know, or this great, you know, and I'm not going to say any names, you know, but, that one, you like that? You know, like, I'm like, no, I didn't like that at all, you know, but I mean, but it was incredible. And of course, this was her also training my ear, you know, and training me to how to listen. And today, I believe I'm way more observant about what my colleagues are doing than they are about what I'm doing. And I pay very close attention to the orchestra. And I can't say that I remember her speaking with me about that, but it's been a part of me for as long as I've been a musician, where what the orchestra was doing was important. So I can't say that I remember her saying it, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, because it's been with me that long. So, yeah. And I know there are other ones who got to study with her longer, who had the benefit of years and years rather than just my 4 years. but I know that these are still things that I'm thinking about today, and I'm lucky to be studying with a student of hers whose teaching method is completely different, but whose ear is absolutely connected to this sound, and so I've been able to hold on to it over all these years. I know I want to say that she had a soft spot in her heart for tenors. I want to believe. I do believe that is true, and I know that like in her, she would tell, because my wife was able to study with her. Well, you're gonna have to take care of him. You're gonna have to take care of him because tenors they can be quite fragile, and I mean, like, that's a hard thing for any person to hear, like I had a hard time hearing it, like, what do you mean? I'm self-sufficient, like I can do what I need to do. But of course, what she's talking about is the weight that we carry is a little different than the weight that a bass or a baritone might carry. Yeah. We have to, it's not very often, it does happen where the success of a show lands on a baritone's shoulders. Of course it happens. But it's more often that they're talking about the tenor. It's the tenor who's walking the high wire act. Oh, we missed the high C. Oh, we missed the high B. Oh, he cracked at this moment. I mean, that stuff is real. And not to say baritones and basses didn't crack, but it was different for them because they were largely singing in their speaking voice. Mm-hmm. And we don't do that. Yeah. So I think her point there was not just that I had to be graceful with myself. And when things didn't go the way I exactly wanted them to, well, I better fix it. But understand that what I'm doing is difficult. Mm-hmm. And so this is why, I mean, really, she was indefatigable. Is that how you say that word? I think so. Yeah. I mean, like, she had such an energy, and I don't know where she got it at 85, 86, 87 years old. I mean, but she could chase and chase and chase until she got what I wanted. And the way we would marry the chest voice to the head voice. I mean, the times we would spend just working on 4-note scales from A to D, then B flat to E flat, then B to E, then C to F, C sharp, F sharp, D, G, all this all the way up to at least B flat. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, really, all she was trying to do was to marry these sounds so that they had a homogeny to them, so that the voice sounded the same from top to bottom, and that was we spent a lot of time doing that sort of thing, and working from low, doing an octave leap, and then a fifth, and then a third, and then back, just to try and get this chest resonance into the top part of the voice. And yeah, you know what I mean? It wasn't like she was trying to get me to carry my chest voice to make a bald chest sound in an F sharp or an open G or whatever. Not that at all, but that they had to have this mix of both, which is why some weeks we would just work on this head placement, the head voice placement, and some weeks we would work only on the chest voice, and she'd work to try and marry the two. Yeah, she was incredible.